Audio unleashed. I've been thinking about the whole intro thing, right? And like how we just never know how we're gonna come into the podcast. And I was thinking about the way Critical Role does it, man. Every week, Critical Role has the same intro. Matt comes on and he's like, "Welcome to Critical Role, where a bunch of nerdy ass voice actors sit around and play Dungeons and Dragons," and everybody goes, "We play Dungeons and Dragons," and like we could do something like that. We'd be like, "Welcome to Audio Unleashed," where a couple of grumpy old audio writers tell you to get off our lawns. I don't know, something, but we could come up with something that works.
There's so much depth, so much more depth to what we do than the way you're portraying it.
Well, I know, but we got to come up with something.
What we're doing is we are just presenting an alternative point of view that's just based on, I don't know, science and critical thinking and stuff like that, as opposed to the typical audio, quote unquote, journalism, where it's just based on them not knowing much about the stuff that they are talking about.
Vibes, man. It's all vibes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tired of vibes.
Yeah.
I say y'all just go with what you just said. Just
who
leave
are
that.
you?
Oh, I am the voice of God.
We haven't introduced you yet. You're not supposed to.
No, but we
talk.
could. I guess we could. Why couldn't we?
Oh, I'll go on mute.
No, you can
jump
in, but you can jump in, but just let us finish the intro. And except you can jump in now, and since everyone's gonna be like, "Well, who the hell's this guy?"
I honestly did not know that y'all had started the intro.
Either.
I thought you were kicking around ideas.
This is what we do.
We roll.
All right, I'm going to go back in my corner. Y'all just come poke me with a stick when you're ready.
Why don't you just tell us who you are right now?
Yeah.
Oh God. Okay. I am Erin Hardison, and that's it. Yeah, you just said tell you who I am.
But explain like why are you on this show?
Well, I mean, I can tell you like the egotistical side of me. I can give you that answer. Like, well, because I'm so self-important and I do cool things and people love me.
All right, let me explain it to you why you're on this show.
Yes.
So you are an audio equipment reviewer, and you have a thing called Erin's Audio Corner, which is a website and a YouTube channel. And correct me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff.
No, you're right.
You do among the most extensive and best speaker measurements out there, because you have some knowledge, but also a very expensive piece of gear that most publications and reviewers are way, way, way too cheap to buy, which is called a Clipple analyzer. And you have, really, really, really in-depth speaker reviews, and you are one of the people that Dennis and I respect. And you published something, or you did something on your YouTube channel that we thought was interesting, and we wanted to talk to you about it. And there we go. And then we'll probably talk to you about some other stuff too.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the video we brought him on to talk about, though.
Yeah.
So the video in question.
Dennis, before we get mad at each other, before we get mad at ourselves, you are Dennis Berger. You are a veteran audio journalist going back like 25 years or something, and you've written for. You write for Soundstage, you write for Wirecutter, you have written for Home Theater Review, for I can never remember. I think Residential Systems and anything else you want to throw in there. I don't know.
No, that's fine. Oh, and Cinelux. We're bringing Cinelux back, so that should be back in operation soon.
Excellent.
Yeah. And you, sir, Brent Butterworth, industry legend, my Yoda. You've been with everybody from Home Theater Magazine to Home Entertainment Magazine. You ran both of those. Home Theater Review, Sounded Vision, Wirecutter, Audio Express. I could go on and on all day, but we got stuff to talk about, man. So let's talk about that stuff.
Let's talk about Erin, because I'm tired of talking about us.
Yeah. So Erin, sorry to spring this on you, but the video that we actually brought you on to talk about this is a video that Brent and I passed back and forth between each other. The Am I Crazy? My Issues with the Beloved Triangle Borea BR03. So yeah, we wanted to talk to you about that review, because you didn't like the speaker. And it's interesting because a lot of people really do. So we wanted to pick your brain about why. We wanted to sort of pick your brain about your process. We wanted to pick your brain about how you came to the conclusions you did and what recommendations you might make in this vein. Brent, anything else you want to talk about with him?
That's a good start.
Yeah.
Let's go with that.
Let's just go with that, man. Let's just jump in.
So what is this speaker? I mean, we got to talk about what this speaker is.
Yes, it's the Triangle Borea. I guess that's how you pronounce it, BR03. And I know that I've had a lot of people ask me to review that speaker because it, I don't like using the word cheap because there's an implicit, meaning behind that for a lot of people. So a lower cost bookshelf speaker that many reviewers and listeners seem to enjoy. And so, I got that speaker to review. I reviewed it and I thought I was done with it, but I guess I wasn't.
Okay. And how was that? Why did you think you were done and why were you not done?
I thought I was done because I had already moved on to the next thing. And then you guys contacted me about discussing it. So I'm assuming that there is there is a different perspective that you would like to discuss, which, you know what, man, I'm all for it. And before we get into this, I should really make sure that people understand who don't know me that when it comes to me reviewing speakers, I have different methods. When I get a speaker in, I will listen to it first, then I'll go through the measurement process. I'll look at the data. I'll compare my notes with my listening notes. And then most of the time I'll go back and listen to it again. Sometimes maybe I don't, just due to time or something like that. But I need to stress that when it comes to my subjective opinion, I try not to rely too heavily on it because I'm just another dude with an opinion at the end of the day. My data is really what I want to stand on its own. And as we, as listeners, grow and evolve our taste, or maybe our taste has changed, I shouldn't even say evolve, some of the things that we may have not liked before or vice versa, we may feel differently about now. And I can give specific points to that. I mean, there's speakers that I reviewed a couple years ago that I like for one reason or another. Now I look at the data, knowing what I know and knowing what I like now, I think, well, I probably wouldn't have liked that speaker as much, or maybe I wouldn't have been as hard on it. So subjective reviews for me are always just a snapshot in time, but the objective data lasts forever as long as
that's a really good point because your opinion may change over time, but the data doesn't change. And our interpretation of the data at this point in the history of speaker measurement, our interpretation of the data really doesn't change much either. We know what those measurements mean now. At least people that, have studied it, have read up on it. I mean, so some people think they know what the measurements mean just by looking at them. And I'm sure you've had viewers who are like, oh, well, I think that measurement means blah, 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 blah. And because I get that all the time. But so what didn't you like about the Triangle Borea I should say this thing sells for, I think when it came out, it was $600 a pair. And now it is about typically more like $400 a pair. Yeah,
I've seen them for $350 pretty steadily over the past few months.
So what didn't you like about it?
Just its nonlinearity. And when I say it's nonlinearity, it's not even so much that it isn't perfectly flat. It's not that. It's when I listened to the speaker, the things that I noticed audibly were just that it seemed inconsistent, for the lack of a better word. And when I say that, maybe sometimes the vocals might sound a little bit higher pitched than a certain other vocal that maybe is barely half an octave above that. Or if you go a couple octaves above that, maybe there's a certain instrument that I expect is going to sound more similar to this tone at a lower frequency. And when I went and looked at the data, I saw some nonlinearity, basically a deviation from flat, but not so much the deviation from flat itself as just how many deviations there were. So within the band, I'm actually going to look at the data while I'm talking about this just to help me recall. From about 100 hertz to 1 kilohertz, there's one large dip, a peak, and then another dip. So in just a little bit, you've already got some pretty decent deviations. And that is what I attributed to my disdain or non-likeliness, whatever that word would be, of the speaker, frankly. Yeah. And that's the other thing too, is when I'm looking back at data and I'm having to try to say, well, this is what I think I heard. Emphasis on think, right? Because it's not blind listening. I try my best to not be biased by the factors that I know that I'm looking at, that I've seen when I purchase a speaker. I try not to look at other people's reviews until after I've completed mine, just to make sure that, okay, it kind of makes sense. You know, I'm not way off in left field. But ultimately, that is what I did not like about the speaker.
So
Aaron,
go ahead,
Brent, do you mind if I interject real quick?
No, please.
Erin, one of the reasons we wanted to bring you on to talk about it, of course, you put this right in your headline. My issues with the beloved Triangle Borea BR03. You acknowledge right up front, this is a speaker that a lot of people really, really like. And Brent has done a lot of panel testing with the speaker and found that a lot of people really, really like it. And Brent, would you want to talk about that real quick? Like what you think it is that people are resonating with, what they like about this speaker and why it's so popular?
I got to point out that Aaron's coming at this from a completely different angle than I am. He's coming at it from top down, I think, more or less. I'm coming at it more from bottom up, right? So at Wirecutter, which is who I tested it for, we're looking for, we set a price limit because we don't want to be getting into $2,000 and $3,000 and $4,000 and $5,000 speakers, because those are enthusiast products and enthusiasts have a lot of ideas already about what they like, right? So, and we can't anticipate that. We're just looking for something that a typical buyer would like. Probably not an audiophile. They could be, but probably not. We do panel tests with, a variety of people. Sometimes they are somewhat naive listeners, but usually they are musicians. We have actually run the speaker past a lot of Wirecutter people as well. But we're comparing it to relatively inexpensive stuff. We already had some picks in like the $400 range, and this thing came out and it was $600. And we actually raised our price ceiling to $600 so I could get it, because a lot of readers had asked us about it. So we panel tested it and it just wiped the floor with everything. And but everything was cheaper. So we made it our upgrade pick, but then the price kept coming down, and then we made it our main pick because we just couldn't find anything else for $400 a pair that we liked. And I have to say, Aaron, I saw your video and I saw your measurements. I'm like, it looks pretty much like my measurements. But I'm coming at it again from bottom up, and I'm coming at it from fairly disastrous measurements, like really bad stuff. And once I see like you see that and you see a bunch of bumps, I'm just kind of like, oh, it has a lot fewer bumps than I'm used to seeing. Because I get some horrible. Yeah. I mean, I get some really crazy. We're doing speakers down to $50 a pair pretty routinely. And, the measurements are just really, really, really bad. So you can go through a speaker like the Triangle Borea BR03 and you can go, oh, okay, it's got these flaws, right? But a lot of the speakers I measure have so many flaws, you don't know where to start.
Yeah, I've experienced that as well.
And so it's really from two different perspectives. But I saw your thing. I was kind of like, oh, he doesn't like the speaker that we liked, except very little of what he said conflicts with what we said. Well, I mean, we just came at it from a different perspective, and against a bunch of cheap speakers, it just wipes the floor with them. But my question is there something else in that price range you like better? Because I would like to know, because I'll get it in and test it.
Yeah, the Emotiva B1 Plus is kind of my constant there, because, and unfortunately, I think they're getting rid of that lineup.
Of course.
If you go to their website, it's been out for a while now. I mean, I don't know how long, but I would say at least 3 to 4 years. Of course, in speakers world, maybe that's not a while, right? Because there's plenty of speakers that have been out for 10 years without a refresh. But yes, they are getting rid of that one, and they're supposed to upgrade it or update it with something newer. I hope that it's a legitimate update and they don't wander off the path of just boosting the highs and calling it a day. It's unfortunate. A lot of companies do that. That's that showroom sound that gets you, oh, wow, it's got detail. You get hooked, and then you take it home and you have a day or two with it, and you're thinking, I don't know, I'm kind of wore out on this. My ears itch, right? Like, so that's the one thing that I've noticed. But outside of the Emotiva B1 Plus, I'm certain there are others. I'm right off the top, I cannot recall of what I would recommend. So I'll leave it there for now. And if I remember others,
I'm really curious, because I think we tried the B1 Plus and oh no, we didn't. I think we just tried the original B1. I didn't know there was a B1 Plus. And so I should probably look into that. The B1 was we tried it and we panel tested it. It was kind of like, it's all right. It didn't get a lot of raves, but the Plus, and I do know that my friend Vance Dickinson, who we all know is the author of the Loudspeaker Design Cookbook, now in its 8th edition. He has worked on a lot of their crossovers. I don't know if he's working on the latest iterations of them. I don't know if he worked on the Plus versus the original, but I mean, if Vance works on it and people actually listen to him, you're going to end up with a good speaker. Sometimes they don't listen to him.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. He was a lot of people's crossovers.
We should call Dan and ask him about this. If there's something new coming out in this line or what's going on, maybe I'll call him next week.
Be a good idea.
I was actually told directly by one of the reps, the same rep who had sent me out, and I'll give this as a cheap plug for Emotiva. I reviewed a decent bit of their speakers. I've been iffy on some. The B1 Plus has been a great one, but there's a couple where I was like, and they still sent me other stuff to review. And it's not all manufacturers, I can say, will do that. And you guys know that as well. Some, once you give them a quote unquote negative review, good luck. And I know a lot of people also think, well, that's why there's no negative reviews. That may be part of it for some reviewers, but I don't fully buy into that based on what I see out there. And unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, those kind of manufacturers are fewer and further between. And they'll send you what they've got because to them, any press is good press. Yeah. Right.
I agree with you.
So I will say that for them.
I agree with you. There's a lot of people that Dennis and I joke that like, they should take me off their press list because all they do is they send me press releases and I make fun of them. But you know, I think that I've had a couple manufacturers that I mean, most of them won't tell you if they just make a lot of excuses. But you know, a few of them have said, I mean, you know, Golden Ear wouldn't send me subwoofers because they didn't agree with doing CTA 2010 measurements. And they told me that. And I'm like, well, all right. I think you're wrong. I think you're really making a giant mistake. But because, you know, if you do those measurements, you will find the flaws in your subwoofer. If you don't, you may or may not. But, you know, let's just say there's another subwoofer manufacturer who I've been trying. They have sent me a lot of stuff in the past, but for some reason they decided they don't want to send me stuff apparently. And, oh, well, it's Rel. I'll just say who it is.
Yeah, I figured.
Oh, you figured that, huh?
I figured. No, I really did. I figured.
Yeah, because I'm critical of a lot. The thing is, I do happen to kind of like a lot of their products, and I kind of like their approach, and I think it's valid. You know, as something that's like a tack on to an existing, you know, audiophile speaker. Well, fine. It's a way to get audiophiles to use subs. And since audiophiles preamps and integrated amps and stuff don't have subwoofer outputs by and large, it's a way to get them to add bass. And those are actually pretty well made products. I mean, they're expensive. They tend to be somewhat underamplified, but in my opinion, but you know, whatever. But the thing is, we have criticized some things they've said in terms of like, you know, when they
regarding DSP.
Well, no, yeah, regarding, you know, whether or not DSP is valid, whether or not, you know, you should use a Class AP amp, whether or not. Dennis, what did they say last time that we were criticizing?
They did their analysis of the RSL and they claimed it only by our metrics, by our standards, it only put out like what 48 watts or something stupid.
Yeah,
like
something
that.
50
they
something
were basically
watts.
saying that every other subwoofer in the world is overrated in terms of power output. You know,
except if you measure the actual output with CTA 2010, the RELs are not competitive. So
that's
you know, but again, I think they make a neat product. I mean, they've made a couple that were kind of stinkers, but you know, there's nothing wrong with them. But you know, I guess they've, you know, it's so much easier to send it to high-end audio publications who will just drool all over it because, oh, gee, bass. And, you know, it has a Neutrik speak-on connector on the back, which makes it special. And it comes with a special cable, so it's special. And then audiophiles and especially audio reviewers will feel like, oh, this is special. This isn't like all those mass market subs from SVS and Sioux Research and people like that. This is special. This is for me.
Yeah. Hey, I think that's probably a pretty good place to take a break and let's go get some water and maybe powder our noses.
Okay.
Erin, would you mind sticking around for another segment? Because I think we got some other stuff we want to talk about.
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
All right,
everybody.
We'll be back.
Yeah.
And we're back. This is audio. What is wrong with our podcast? Our podcast, that was not an engineering error. That was, we decided to let, since our guest, Erin Hardison of Erin's Audio Corner, the website and YouTube channel, is like Dennis from the South. We thought we'd see if he could do the Unleashed part instead of Dennis, but he decided to improvise a little bit and do something. Well, I was trying to be different. Well, at least you said the word unleash, so people know what podcast it is. So that's good. So, but we wanted to come back, and normally we just have people on for one segment if we have anybody on at all, and but we wanted to have you on for an extra segment because this is a chance for us to pick your brain because we are old. You are nowhere near as old. Okay. We've been doing this for a long time. You kind of came up in the last, 5-6 years. Is that right?
So with the channel, I'd say it's about 3. Whenever COVID hit is when I made the YouTube channel. But before then, I was testing raw drivers back to about 2010 using Clipple products and had my own site and stuff like that.
Yeah. But you are one of the really newer and up and coming guys, and certainly by far one of the most technically capable. Someone that Dennis and I respect, where we look at your opinion and go, oh, here's what he said. So that's worthy of taking into consideration.
We're the past and you're the future, basically.
Yeah, but we are the past and you're no, we are, dude, I am working very hard to make myself part of the past. And Dennis,
well,
Dennis will eventually, but so we came in a completely different media environment, completely different kind of everything. And so I wanted to, so just by comparison, I came into this, I had a magazine job at Video Magazine, and I moved to New York City, and I bounced around to a couple magazines, and I found Video, and I thought, well, this is a good fit because I had a lot of audio experience. I was a musician. I knew a lot about recording, and I had some electrical engineering experience, not as an electrical engineer, but I built lots of stuff. I could build an amp and stuff. But I came in and it was very much like, there weren't a lot of enthusiasts. There were the enthusiast magazines were like Stereo Review, and Stereo Review basically said, oh, everything sounds the same. And even like speakers, they kind of pretty much said sound the same. And everything was based on very, very primitive measurements compared to what we have now. There was very little science telling what those measurements meant. And, so I kind of felt like I was first at war with the Stereo Review approach of everything sounds the same. And then as the enthusiast publications like Stereophile and the Absolute Sound became more prominent, then my big battle was like, well, these people are kind of full of crap. And I wanted to have something that was a lot less foofy and oriented towards selling high-end audio product, and also something that actually respected science, which quite often those publications don't. Stereophile often does, but sometimes it's inconvenient for them to do that, and so they don't. And so those are the kind of like the dragons that I felt that was my focus in my career. It's like, that's what I wanted to do, is slay those dragons, so to speak. And I'm thinking like, you got into this for some kind of a reason. Why'd you get into it?
It's actually pretty simple. Well, let me go back to the beginning of things. And I said beginning, it was like around 2009, 2010. My background is aerospace engineering. That's what my degree is in. I worked as a propulsion test engineer for NASA, or at NASA, not for NASA. I was a contractor for a couple of years and really enjoyed that. So my mind has kind of been driven toward test and analysis. Mixed with my music of love, I think that's a lot of us. That's why we get into this hobby, is because we love music. It's not because we love graphs. We love music first and foremost. So I just kind of combined those two. Started testing drivers on my own, picked up a couple books, tried to learn how to do it, failed miserably a few times, published data that was way out of whack. Luckily, people took the opportunity to help me learn rather than just scold me and tell me I was an idiot and dismissing me. Because if not for some of those people, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I probably wouldn't have had the courage to keep doing what I was doing. And around 2010, I started testing raw drive units using Clipple's product as their laser scanner. It's called LSI, so large signal. I can't remember what the I stands for, but anyway, it's large signal something. And basically, it's like TS measurements, but on steroids. So it allows you to get the true.
Okay.
Yes, right. It allows you to get the true linear excursion of a speaker rather than just doing a voice coil and gap height and things like that using geometry. You actually measure the motor force, you measure the suspension, you measure inductance. And from those, there is an IEC standard that has a limit. Basically, it says X% of this, X% of this, X% of this. If it's within these regions, then that's where you set the linear excursion. And therefore, you can say, all right, well, this manufacturer claims linear X max of 26 millimeters, but due to having very poor suspension, it's only 13 millimeters one way, that kind of thing. And then that evolved into testing for frequency response. I built my own IEC baffle that took up all of 10 feet of my bonus room height wise. It was huge. It was so awesome. It was huge. I had to go on a hiatus for a little while, pick that back up again. But fast forward to around whenever COVID hit, guys, I feel like I'm still living in a fog from it. I was watching a particular reviewer and he said some things and I thought, what? Like, what are you on, man? Like these speakers are in front of me and they don't even do remotely what you're talking about doing. And then I watched a few more of his videos and I thought, all right, well, this guy's obviously just making stuff up as he goes. You know, like sometimes people hear what they hear, but I felt like this guy was very disingenuous. And I thought, well, I know how to measure speakers, so why don't I just make my own channel?
Yeah. So
I started out with the mindset, I'm going to come in like a wrecking ball and I'm going to destroy all these people. And I quickly learned that, number one, that's not really who I am. That's not how I like to get things done. And number two, contrary to popular belief, people don't want to be told that their speakers suck. So,
Erin, I have often said that most of the people who read my reviews have already bought the product and they're just coming looking for validation. So
and statistically speaking, that is absolutely true. But what I learned to do was I can still tell the truth and I can show the data, but I can do it without coming out and saying, all right, if you bought the speaker, you are a moron, right? Because truthfully speaking, there are speakers that I've measured and reviewed that they don't measure that. Well, they don't measure bad, but they don't measure great. And I still enjoyed the heck out of them. Don Audio, there's been a couple I've reviewed recently and really enjoyed. But if you look at them, you can definitely see some problems. And people that only look at the grass would run away in fear. But having heard them, there are other things about them that I enjoyed. So I went into it with that aspect. Okay, let's talk about the performance. Let's talk about frequency response. Let's talk about what you probably can expect to hear in the room. Let's talk about how aiming matters. Do you point it directly at you? Do you point it away from you? What happens when you point it away from you and you mix with the reflections from a side wall that's bare? Okay, what if you have curtains in this room? What can you expect? And then distortion. How audible do you think this is going to be? Does it make mechanical noise? What's the maximum SPL that you can reasonably expect to get? Talk about the other parameters that really matter and then say, here it is. Here's what I'm giving you. This is my 2 cents on it. And I hope that you make a decision that works for you.
Yeah.
And my hope is that people will maybe buy one or two of the speakers that I reviewed. They'll look at the data and they'll start to say, oh, okay, I'm drawing some correlations here. And it's not just nonsense to them. It actually means something and helps them make better purchase decisions. And when I do that and I get that kind of feedback, that's what I enjoy the most. So that's really why I do what I do.
Let me ask you this, if I may. What do you think about reviewers who, I mean, you and I are among the elite who do measurements.
Okay. Oh, yes. Okay.
What do you think about reviews that, reviewers who don't do measurements, who just, listen to the product and tell you what they heard?
So I don't want to say that their opinion doesn't matter, because I came through this from car audio is really where I got my start. And I think a lot of people actually got their start in car audio. It's very surprising how many people I run into. They're like, yeah, I used to work for Harman in car audio, And there's a side of car audio that is focused on sound quality. And the idea there is that you're trying to create a 2-channel stereo, a really good one in the car. And that's very, very, very hard. Car audio is so much harder than home audio, because in the home, you're sitting directly between the speakers. You have control of where you can position the speakers. You don't have that ability in car audio. You're sitting in the driver's seat. So you're already asymmetrically positioned between speakers. So you have to learn DSP. You have to learn about the room. You have to learn about, how do I control this resonance while not affecting the response in this other frequency band? When you roll all that up, you get to a point where you feel like you have a better understanding, but it's also judged because there's competition of it. it's just subjectively. They don't use a microphone and measurements. And frankly, I don't know how we can, I still don't know that we can get there in car audio because there's so much else going on. So you have to rely on people's subjective feedback. And I've been doing that for over 15 years. And there's always a takeaway from somebody's opinion. They may get out of your car and say, all right, well, 400 to 500 hertz sounds a little bit congested. And you say, what the heck are you talking about? And then 2 weeks later, you're thinking, well, maybe they were right? Like, so how much of that was put into your brain by them, or how much of that is real? So I try not to discount anybody's opinion. That's a long way of saying what I just said. I try not to discount anybody's opinion, but at the same time, it's just an opinion at that point. If you don't have something tangible to back that up, then it doesn't mean a lot to me. And I've noticed in the past, truthfully, I don't watch a lot of videos anymore because I just spend enough of my own time doing this. I mean, you guys know how it is.
There's only 50 or 100 or 1,000 people doing audio videos now.
Oh, well, that too. I mean, I've got 30 speakers in my living room in total right now that I'm trying to get caught up on, and it's insane. So, and some of these people want their stuff back eventually. I'm like, well, maybe. We'll see.
Worse than me.
But maybe. I'm trying my best. I injured my back recently, so that really set me back a few weeks. I'm sorry, I forgot where I was going. I tend to do that.
We were talking about reviewers who don't do any kind of measurements or technical analysis. And
I'll just be blunt. My blunt thing is I don't.
Hey, Erin.
Hello,
Erin.
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
I accidentally hit the mute button.
Your blunt thing is, so can you just say this sentence over again? Okay.
No, my blunt thing is, and then I edited myself because there's a lot of curse words after that. So,
okay. No, go ahead I see what you did. That was like a little broadcasting trick. It's very sophisticated.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a trick. Yeah.
So we don't do that kind of. We're pretty straightforward here at Audio
Unleashed.
Yeah, we don't do all that fancy
because
stuff.
you were failing me, Erin. Sorry, I had to take back over.
I'm sorry. Hey, dude, that's the same thing I've been told by my mom and dad for the past 40 years. So you say I fail you all you want. I'm used to it by now. Anyway,
so do you have any? Do you like? I had dragons to slay in my career. I had, and I still do. Yeah. I'm still doing that. What are your dragons to slay?
Let me come back to that. And I will give you a more succinct, honest answer. Is that in the past, what I've seen from a lot of subjective based reviewers is that their opinions vary between speakers. And sometimes it just seems there's too much inconsistency for me to draw a meaningful conclusion. And I say that specifically because a lot of times what I've noticed is that people will say subjective opinions are just as valid as anybody else's objective data. And to some degree, that's true.
Well,
but the fault there is that you're basing, the premise is just follow a person's trend, right? Like follow this person if they tend to like this thing, this X, Y, or Z. Well, unfortunately, what I notice is that most of them don't follow their own trend. They just meander and vary, kind of like that Triangle Borea BR03 frequency response. It's up and down, depending on what mood they're in.
Way to refer back to the previous segment. Very impressive.
So, I don't mean to sound critical. I mean, I try to use my words carefully because I don't want to upset anybody, but that's the truth is I just don't pay a lot of attention to those. If you've got data and you can say, here's this thing, and I think I heard this, and let's talk about it. But my analytical mindset is more of one where I want to dive into things and don't want to just hear you say it sounds cold because I don't know what the hell cold means, right? Like,
hey, do you have
a quest to figure out what the hell inner detail is?
That's detail within detail, man.
Well, that explains
so simple. Why didn't we think of that?
That was easy.
Light bulb.
Wow.
Erin, I said this to you when we were, a while back, Joe Mariano was kind enough to invite me and Brent onto Daily Hi-Fi, which you are frequently on. And I said this to you then, but I want to repeat it here for anybody who didn't watch that episode. One of my favorite things that you do, and the reason I'm such a big fan of your work, is you have this thing where it seems to me what you're saying to your viewer is, if I can explain this to you to where you can understand it, then you don't need me as much, right? You were trying to instill a fundamental understanding of what these different characteristics mean and how they impact subjective performance And so they don't need to come to you for every single question they want answered. I really, really respect that. And I'm wondering if that was a conscious decision on your part, or if that's just something that emerged naturally from the way you approach things.
Be honest with you, I'm not really sure of that answer. So I guess it would probably be the latter, that it just kind of took place.
I mean, just to give you an example, you know, when you basically show like the on and off axis response of a speaker and explain why this speaker can be successfully EQ'd, but this speaker cannot, you give the most concise and meaningful explanation of that of anybody I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of people attempt to answer that question. And for you, it's just your explanation is intuitive and makes complete sense. And I think anybody who watches your videos is going to come away understanding why this is not just some, you know, oh, it's just happenstance that you can EQ this speaker successfully and this one you can't. And so I really love the way you do that. And I wonder if that was a conscious effort or like I said, that was just, it's something you came across organically, that explaining the fundamentals while you are also explaining the performance of one particular speaker. Like each speaker review that you do is a little lesson in speaker design, in my opinion. And I think that's a great approach.
Well, first of all, I definitely appreciate that. That's really, I got respect for my peers, man, is the highest honor that anybody can get. So I really appreciate that. So to answer your question, truthfully, I don't script anything. I just pull up the data and I just talk as I see it. So sometimes I will think back, I didn't do a good job explaining X, Y, or Z, but it's out there in the world, you know? And then other times I think, well, I talk way too much about it. So you ever just have days where you feel like you're not on and then other days where you feel like you're on? That's how it is for me. It just kind of depends. And I'm hoping that there's enough of my videos out there that people can put these things together. And truthfully, at some point, what I would really hope from all of this is that, like you said, people won't need me and I'll just be a personality. I'll just be a talking head. Like, here it is, I'm going to explain the data. But the other factor is, I mean, that is true as well. But the other factor is that a lot of people are still coming in, you know, until I hit 2 million subscribers, I'm never going to reach the point where I feel, okay, I don't have to do this anymore. I can just throw the data on my website and call it a day.
Yeah.
People still need a little bit of explanation. And some people are in this hobby just because it's fun and they like hearing people talk about speaker stuff. And I like doing that too.
I get that, but like a while back, Paul from PS Audio did he answers readers' questions, and somebody wrote him in to say like, what is a resolving speaker? What does that mean? What does it mean for a speaker to be resolving, and how do you determine it, and whatever? And he never really answered the question. He gave a few examples, right? And then he said, you know what? If you want to know whether a speaker is resolving or not, call us up, call customer service and tell us what speaker you're looking at, and we'll tell you whether it's resolving or not. He didn't answer the question because there's no metric by which he could answer the question. He was just sort of speaking off the top of his head, and I think I kind of remember I like these, and maybe I remember, but what you're doing is the exact opposite of that. Maybe you haven't put out the entire Erin's Audio Corner glossary, but when you are talking about characteristics of speakers, you are giving people the fundamentals that they can carry forward to other people's reviews, and I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't really think about it like that, so that is cool.
So are there any particular reviewers you like? And you don't have to say us because we had you on our show.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to.
Good. Then I'd be worried. I'm doing something wrong.
No, actually, Brent, I remember reaching out to you when I started CEA testing, 2010 testing for the subwoofers. And honestly, man, I was nervous. I was like, this guy probably ain't going to reply because he probably doesn't have any time. And you replied, and you didn't just send me like a simple answer. You talked to me about stuff. So I need to really, I've done this before publicly on one of my videos, but I want to do this personally to you and thank you for you doing that, because without somebody there to teach somebody else and help them along, like the stuff's never going to get passed on.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you doing that, taking the time out to do it.
I was honored to do it.
So to answer your question, Audioholics, James Larson is somebody who great. I really appreciate. Yeah, James goes through a lot of trouble, and he's still testing speakers manually, doing the quasi-anechoic method, taking them on a ladder and standing them up. And dude, I've been there, done that. And I hated every bit of it. It would take me 12 to 15 hours sometimes to test a speaker. The amount of effort that he puts in, I don't think unless you've tested a speaker that you have any idea how much effort it takes. So James is certainly to be applauded. My friends, Joe and Tel, I think Joe does a great job. And I like how when I first started my YouTube channel, Joe was one of the few guys that was doing measurements. So that's cool. Ron Bernay, New Record Day, he does measurements as well. Danny does measurements, and I don't know Danny personally, and I know there's some stuff about him when it comes
Danny
to
Ritchie of GR
power
Research
cables and stuff like that. Yes, sorry. Yes, Danny Ritchie. When it comes to the power cable and things like that, I don't care about any of that. I appreciate that he's providing measurements, so I think that's cool. Yeah, personally, I don't get into cables and stuff. I just I've got enough time wrapped up in just measuring speakers. I can't do anything else at this point. Amir, obviously, I've got to point to Amir
Audio Science
for
Review.
All the effort. Yeah, he's a machine. He just hammers stuff out. I'm trying to think. I mean, I'm certain there's others that I'm forgetting.
That's enough.
I think that I think that caps off the top of them. Outside of that, and I just don't have time, to watch anybody else. There's a few that I might occasionally watch just because I'm curious about something they're talking about. But if they're a subjective only reviewer, more than likely I'm already thinking I'll just get that speaker and figure it out myself.
Yeah.
You and I have an idea of what makes sense or what doesn't. So if somebody says something in their review, not necessarily a subjective opinion, but just something that to not be fact, we go, that person, they're either wrong or they're intentionally lying. And that's the concern, is that they might be doing the latter. But people who are new to this don't have that insight. And in an ideal world, I would have balls of steel. And I would come into this thing like a bull in a china shop, and I would just start plucking people's reviews out and be like, all right, this dude is full of crap, and I'm going to explain to you why.
Well, that's what we do here at Audio.
Unleashed.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm trying to keep the drama to a minimum because I've got enough stress in my life that I can't deal with anything else.
We had you on here because we wanted the drama.
Well, okay, then let's talk about it, man. Let's go. Let's start naming names.
Go ahead. We don't care.
I don't know any of them.
Oh, okay.
What's funny, though, is that what I noticed that's really prominent in the bodybuilding, exercise, fitness YouTube realm is a lot of these guys will make, I don't call them reaction videos, but I guess you could call them that, where they'll use excerpts from one person's video and they'll say, all right, well, this is where I disagree, or this is where this guy's wrong, but let me show you the science why. Let me show you this research about your metabolism and those kind of things. And I made a poll recently on my YouTube page. Would you guys be interested in seeing something like that? And I didn't really expect the response I got. I think last I looked, it was over 1,000 votes, which for my channel is a lot. And it was 85% were saying yes, they would be interested in seeing that. But as long as I did it in a tasteful way, not where I came in guns a-blazing, calling people out, but just saying, all right, let me take this thing that they said and let's dissect it. And let's see how it can make sense. Maybe try to understand it using data. And I really want to try to start doing that. Not all the time, but occasionally, just to spice things up.
Well, that would be delightful. Yeah. It would be delightful to me. I'd thoroughly enjoy that. And it's not just because I want to, we don't want to trash people.
No.
Well, we do. Dennis, do we want to trash people?
I don't want to trash people. Sometimes I think you do, though.
I think there's a couple that I probably do want to trash.
There are probably some that I want to, but
and we kind of do sometimes, but it's more like when we do, it's because if people want to listen to a speaker, right, and say, hey, this speaker sounds great. And I look at the speaker and like you and I would look at that speaker and know, that doesn't work, right? And there's a lot of high-end audio speakers that are like that. Some of the really exotic, esoteric things just don't work. And people like you and I can sit there and you can draw the frequency response chart of that and draw the off-axis and stuff just by knowing what the design of it is and what the crossover is, right? And so. But I don't care. It's when some of these clowns start talking about how we need measurements that reflect what people hear. It's like You are an idiot if you say that. We have that research going back decades. Yeah. And it's like, well, I choose to ignore it because blah, blah, whatever. It's like, I have no respect for those people and I don't mind calling them out. And we have.
I get upset when I think people are trying to take advantage of other people, when people are trying to pull the wool over somebody's eyes just to make a buck, when they're spreading, fear, uncertainty, and doubt about a certain topic, when they're adding disinformation or misinformation to the conversation for their own personal gains. That's when I get upset. So,
yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, and it may sound egotistical, but I think the core of us are trying to do the right thing by the audience. And I try to approach it like, what would I tell my friend? If my best friend said, I've got $1,000 and I want to do X, Y, or Z, what do you think? I would try to give my audience the exact same advice that I would give that friend.
That's really great.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's the right way to do it. Hey, we should probably get going. Dennis and I have a whole nother segment to record about something or another. Yeah. Dennis, what are we talking about in the next segment, since we did not actually properly introduce everything?
We are talking about CEDIA and CTA standards for immersive audio. So,
yeah, just released as of like a few days ago, in fact, in conjunction with the CEDIA show that just ended, the CEDIA Expo.
Yeah.
And then we're going to have a Patreon segment that's going to be talking about
Fast Car. I interviewed Dr. Sean Olive about using Tracy Chapman's Fast Car as test material in all of the NRC research and all of the Harman research. So we had a good conversation about that, and we're going to dig into it.
And we have things to say about that.
Yeah.
Not surprisingly. So we got Erin, we got to thank you for being on. This has been great. This has been even better than I think we expected.
Yeah.
We didn't expect much, but it's
yeah, no, that's fair. I've met me. I would think the same thing. Yeah.
Look, I'm going to enjoy any conversation with somebody that knows their britches and not pants. I mean, come on. It's just, you're my people, man. I appreciate you. And also you eat fried okra. So come on.
Exactly. And it's dinner, not supper.
No, see, that's where we're going to fight about it, man. No. If you have to put on fancy britches, it's dinner. If you don't have to put on fancy britches, it's supper.
I actually had to explain that to somebody at work the other day. I was like, what? How do you live in the South? How do you not know this? Anyway. Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, guys. For real. It's been fun. And I took up a lot of your time. But, man, when I get rolling on this stuff, it's really fun, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, well, we enjoyed having you on. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, man.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
I'm Dennis.
And I am Brent.
And in this segment, we are going to be talking about best practices and PDFs. How exciting is that? No, anyway, You sent me an article from CE Pro called RP22 Immersive Audio Guidelines Set to Revolutionize Industries, says CEDIA CEO.
Yeah.
So we should probably explain a few terms to people real quick that might not be familiar. So just last week, as we're recording this, one of the big trade shows for our industry, CEDIA Expo, happened. That is a trade show that revolves around custom installation. So, your local home theater installer, that's where they all meet up and, show the new products and trade ideas and things like that. And CEDIA as an organization does a few different things. And one of the things they do is, called advocacy, but they've got this new document. They've actually teamed up with the CTA which is the organization that runs CES in January. I think probably most people are more familiar with that than they are with CEDIA.
Yeah.
But they've gotten together. The two organizations have gotten together and they've updated their recommendations and best practices for home theater design, and they've added guidelines for immersive audio. So, Brent, do you want to describe what immersive audio means?
Well, that's like, audio that has something more than 7.1 channels, and typically that means height channels. It can mean other additional surround channels, but typically it's going to be something like Dolby Atmos or DTS-X, where they add 2 or 4 or more channels in the ceiling, or just sort of over higher up than your regular speakers, et cetera, and it gives you a sense of height and greater immersion. And so the fact that those technologies are now prevalent and available in innumerable products, I think, is what spurred CEDIA to do this, because they had a previous home theater standard, but this is the immersive audio standard, which adds a lot of, I think it really expands on the whole thing to begin with, but it also adds a lot of extremely specific information about creating immersive audio systems.
Yeah, the thing is, there's also RO3D. That's a less common immersive audio format in the US, but I think it's got a lot more traction in Europe, and it's used more for music discs, right? There are people who still buy music on discs.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is, all of these different standards, Dolby Atmos, DTS-X, and RO3D, have different recommendations for where do you place all of these speakers. And so I think one of the coolest things about this document is that they tackle that. They address that. They tackle the disparities between the different formats and their recommendations for where do height speakers go, what angle should this be at, and they sort of create a unified recommendation for, okay, how do you do it if you want to do all of this? I think that's really cool, really valuable.
Yeah. I have to say, I went through this. This is 144 pages, right? This document. Yeah. I went through it. I didn't read every word. There's a lot of it that was kind of, I mean, look, I've been in home theater since literally kind of the beginning of it. Yeah. And there's an awful lot that I already knew. And by that, we should say also this was done in cooperation with not only the companies that, make immersive audio, Dolby, DTS, and RO3D, but also in conjunction with several custom installers, and also in conjunction with manufacturers, and in conjunction with general experts like Anthony Grimani, who has his own acoustics company and his own consulting company, but is just a kind of general expert on home theater. And in fact, he's been around. I met him when he worked at THX, really in the early days of THX. So he's been around through the whole genesis of home theater.
Can I give a shout out real quick?
Yeah, please do.
I think a lot of people might know that I still produce the Soundstage Audiophile podcast. There's a new host on there now. And a few weeks ago, we actually had Anthony Grimani on to teach Jordan, the new host, about room acoustics and all of this. And it ended up
that's
being
a good guy to talk to.
A really fascinating episode. So I'll link to that in the show notes as well.
But anyway, so there's a lot of expertise behind this. This is not just a few guys opining about stuff. And so much of it is based on things like the speaker research that came out of Harman and out of the Canadian National Research Council, which, of course, Floyd Toole was kind of the leading light on that. And a lot of this is based on Floyd Toole's book, which is Sound Reproduction, The Acoustics and Psychoacoustics of Loudspeakers in Rooms. Did I get that right?
I think you did, yeah.
So this is based on a lot of science. This is you would expect, I think in the early days of CEDIA, it might have been a few installers going, well, I do blah, 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 blah. Which, may be of value and may not. But this is I went through this document and there's a lot of, they really spell out a lot of basics. Because let's face it, somebody who's 25 and just starting out doing this with a custom installation firm doesn't know anything yet, probably. Right. They might have gotten onto, they might have read Audioholics or something and gotten, some in-depth information, but they also might not. And this kind of takes you through a lot of the basic, just the real basic stuff of home theater, in addition to some really in-depth technical stuff. There is one thing that they did not put in here that I wish they had, but I didn't see anything I disagree with. I was kind of like, yeah, this is right on. This is really good, detailed information, some of which I didn't know. And I thought the best part about it was their extremely extensive information on speaker placement.
Yeah.
And there was some of that I really didn't know. And you were when we were talking before we started doing this, you were mentioning some of that really impressed you.
Yeah, there was something that I wanted to hate about this document that I ended up loving. So they basically break down the target performance of a home theater into 4 different levels. And I was like, boy, good luck quantifying that, guys. And then they did a really good job of it. I'm like, okay, fine. I will hold your beer. But the one point that's interesting is when they're talking about maximum allowable vertical angle between adjacent upper speakers, they break it down like for a level 2 theater, you can have up to 80 degrees and level 3 up to 60 degrees, up to in the level 4, 50 degrees. I actually kind of think that's still too much. I mean, I think it should be like 30 degrees, but that's, you know what? I am one guy with that opinion. And this is a whole consortium of people who've come to that conclusion. Yeah. But I thought that was pretty cool. The other thing that I thought was really cool is they have taken you through all of these different speaker configuration scenarios. Here's how many speakers, here's where they're placed. And they've really walked you through the process of, okay, this speaker setup would be good for this. And so in other words, if you want to do Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, and RO3D, here's how many speakers you need. Here's where you need to place them. If you want to prioritize Dolby Atmos performance over the others, maybe take these speakers and move them here. And they give really concrete recommendations like that I just think are super impressive.
I agree. I saw that and was kind of like, wow, I don't think I've ever seen that information before.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also thought that it was pretty well written. Any audio enthusiast could pick this up and understand it right away. Do you know if this is, is this going to be like broadly available to people?
Yeah, I think so. I just went and downloaded it. I think you give them your email address, but we'll put a link in the show notes. So
what do you think is the thing that I thought it was missing?
Ooh, you put me on the spot with that. I don't know. Why don't you just tell me?
They didn't talk about CTA 2010 subwoofer output measurements.
Oh, you're right. They didn't.
And that's a really good measurement. And that is a really useful measurement. If you go to Audioholics, they actually equate those measurements to specific sizes of rooms that a subwoofer can handle. And they could have probably called up Gene Delassalle at Audioholics and said, we want to, have some guidelines in here and let's talk about what you've done and see if it makes any sense and stuff like that, because that would be really useful because those measurements are not, unlike a lot of audio measurements, those are really consistent. And, a manufacturer's measurements are not going to be a whole lot different from a reviewer's measurements. And generally speaking, the manufacturer's measurements are trustworthy. People don't fake that because they know, unlike something like, say, your bass extension on a speaker, right? You can go, oh, this speaker goes down to 40 hertz. But what does that mean? Is it like minus 20 dB at 40 hertz, or is it minus 3 dB at 40 hertz? Does it have any real output at 40 hertz, et cetera, et cetera? CTA 2010 is a measurement you can't cheat.
Right.
There's just no way to fudge it. There is no way to express that in a way that is advantageous to you. And they probably could have used that here. But it's kind of CTA 2010 is kind of like a little cult.
Yeah.
So
they do talk about.
I think they didn't have anybody who's in the cult.
They do talk about CTA 2034. So there's at least that. So,
which is that's the measurement that actually Erin does, because he has a Klippel analyzer, and you can do it anechoically, or you can do it with a Klippel analyzer, and you can actually even do it with like the Clio quasi-anechoic analyzer I have, but it just takes a long time because each speaker gets 70 measurements. Yuck. Yeah.
Well, man, I think we've got a whole episode in the can here. What do you think?
I think we do. We have our Patreon segment coming up, though.
That's true.
For our Patreon subscribers, that's a deep dive into Tracy Chapman's Fast Car and why Sean Olive recommends it, and why we will also take exception to some people's choice of demo and evaluation music, and go into depth about why we take exception to it. But of course, we're known here at Audio
Unleashed
for taking exception to things that other people do.
Real quick, before we jump into the credits, I want to say something real quick. I've had a few people email me or message me about our whole Patreon pitch. And they're like, I love you guys, but I'm not going to spend $3 a month on like an extra segment, whatever. And I think they kind of got the impression that we considered, the people who would not subscribe to our Patreon sort of lesser listeners. We absolutely do not. You guys are awesome. And so we appreciate you, whether you can support us on Patreon or not. The one thing I would say is a couple of people have asked, like, is there anything I can do other than give you $3? Yes, there is. If you give us a review on iTunes or whatever, that helps immensely. So if you love the show and you want to support us and you don't want to subscribe to Patreon, we completely understand. We love you. Just maybe, give us a review, give us 5 stars, whatever. Maybe leave us a comment on YouTube. That stuff helps immensely. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're just like every other podcast
Absolutely.
now. Yeah. Like and subscribe. Is that what they do?
Shamelessly begging for attention.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about some music, man.
We did music for this.
That's true,
and one tune is going to be a new tune that was by first of all, this is a Butterburger production.
That is true. Yeah.
And but I think probably the first tune will be a new composition by the Butterburger House Band, the world's least dangerous band. And not really even a band, 2 guys messing around with computers, really, mostly.
Yeah. Hey, man, Fatboy Slim was one guy messing around with a computer. So,
well, sure. I'm not denigrating people that mess around with computers. But and the second piece of music will probably be some old thing I did a long time ago that we scrounge up, or maybe something newer. Actually, you know what? I have something I really want to put in there that was a demo I did for someone, and I just listened to it the other day, and I thought that was actually good.
Ooh, I can't wait to hear it.
So I'm gonna drop it in there.
Cool.
So that'll be by me, but it'll actually be written by Ron Cyger, who's my partner in the band that used to be called Take Two, but I think we're going to call it Cyger and Butterworth now.
Very cool.
So, all right, are we done?
I think so, man. So yeah, patrons, stick around. We got one more segment for you. Everybody else, we will see you in 2 weeks, and thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. If you liked what you heard and wish there'd been a little bit more of it, we got some good news for you.
Indeed, we do. If you check out patreon.com/Audio Unleashed, all one word, you can get new episodes a little earlier than everybody else.
And sometimes it's like a day or 2 early. Sometimes it's nearly a week. We never really know until we start editing.
But the big plus is that you get extended cuts of every episode. And usually that's going to mean a whole extra segment that's about maybe a geekier topic or something that's a little more personal to us, or something that's just going to really appeal to the hardcore Audio Unleashed listener.
Yeah, what it boils down to is if you're somebody who would support Audio Unleashed on Patreon, we're going to make sure the bonuses to every episode are really aimed straight at your interests.
Yeah, and so if you want to hear these segments, you can subscribe to our Patreon for $3 a month, which is less than I spend every single day on my cup of coffee when I go to Starbucks to write my boring articles.
Yeah. One more time with that URL, that's patreon.com/Audio Unleashed.
Or Audio
Unleashed. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.